And after more than 100 years inside the United States Capitol, the statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee was removed in late December of 2020. And so Governor Ralph Northam appointed a committee to find Lee's replacement.
Soon after, Virginia's Commission of Historical Statues voted to recommend civil rights icon Barbara Rose Johns to represent the Commonwealth. WFXR's Parker King tells her story this morning.
At the onset of the civil rights movement, before the Montgomery bus boycott and the Greensboro sit-in, one student in Farmville, Virginia made the push against the claim of separate but equal. That student was Barbara Johns.
Barbara Johns was a 16-year-old student.
Cameron Patterson is the executive director of the Robert Russa Moton Museum in Farmville, formerly the high school Johns attended.
Originally, it was built for 180 students. In the decade that would follow its opening, that enrollment would increase to about 450.
The lack of resources in almost every aspect at Moton became a concern for Johns and her classmates.
For example, there was a science classroom here at Moton that only had one microscope available to the entirety of the student population.
The county school board's neglect of the issue led Johns to take matters into her own hands. Unbeknownst to parents and school leaders, Johns organized a school walkout on April 23, 1951, where all 455 students joined her.
They knew that the collective was important.
They went down to the courthouse, and you know how brave that had to have been to do all of those things, and she had to make all of those things work in order for her plan to be successful.
Brenda Hale is president of the NAACP chapter in Roanoke. She was a rising second grader in Roanoke when Johns and her classmates walked out in Farmville.
We, of course, had heard about this young girl. She had developed this courage, and at 16, she had wherewithal to want to change things.
Hale tells us it was the NAACP's help shortly after the march that eventually brought the students' concerns to the national stage.
They filed a suit for the children, and then that became part of the other five.
The 5 cases that would make up the case of Brown versus the Board of Education, the Supreme Court case that would set the tone for school desegregation across the country. The case in Farmville would become Davis v. County School Board of Prince Edward in 1954. But by that time, Johns was no longer in Farmville.
Following the student strike, there are concerns for her safety, and so her family makes the decision to send her to Montgomery, Alabama.
Johns would visit as often as she could, but never returned to Farmville. She would create a career working in the Philadelphia public school system as a librarian. She passed away in 1991 at the age of 56 in Philadelphia. Despite leaving Virginia at such a young age, the movement she inspired made her a top 5 finalist to replace Confederate General Robert E. Lee's statue in the U.S. Capitol, a statue that had stood there for 111 years.
I think that it's important that whomever was going to go in that spot reflected the values of today's Virginia.
She did not know how this was going to end up. By starting in little old Farmville and then branch out across the state and then to the NAACP and into the big Brown versus the Board of Education, she didn't know that from the beginning.
Johns was announced as the replacement to General Lee in December of 2020.
I had the opportunity to call Barbara's sister, Joan Johns Cobbs, and you know, I said to her, I said, I just want you to sit down for a moment because I've got something good to share with you.
I thought it was very exciting because it gives the opportunity for younger people to understand and learn about her and to know exactly what she did.
With the new statue representing the Commonwealth, both Patterson and Hale hope her memory will show young people today that change is but one person away, just like it was with Johns almost 70 years ago.
They knew they deserved better. That was a part of this fight to ensure that they got that for themselves and for those around them.
Reporting this Black History Month, Parker King, WFXR News.
And Patterson hopes when spectators look on Johns' statue, they think more than just about Johns, but the hundreds of students, parents, and community members who stood alongside her in the fight for equality.